What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the newest Stephen King adaptation, It. It is directed by Andy Muschietti, stars Jaden Lieberher, Bill Skarsgård, and Finn Wolfhard. It is an adaptation of the Stephen King book of the same name. Now, many people have seen the miniseries starring Tim Curry from the 1990s that is also an adaptation of the Stephen King book, It. And this film basically follows a group of sort of bullied kids as they try to hunt down this evil clown named Pennywise that seems to be terrorizing their town and kidnapping children that are then never found again. Now, this film, I think, is near the top of a lot of people's most anticipated movies of this year. Its trailer broke the record for the most views in a day on YouTube, which is insane, especially for a movie that isn't a sequel or anything. It's just such a well-made trailer. And basically, after that trailer, everyone everywhere knew about this movie and wanted to see it because it looked terrifying. Now, I went and saw this film with mild expectations. I'm not much of a horror film fan. I think that some of the classics are really, really phenomenal films, and I think in terms of modern horror, there are only a select few that are really worth watching. So going into this, I didn't really know which way this movie was going to fall. Obviously, I was hoping it was going to end up being a classic, but I didn't know, so I went in with a pretty open mind. Now, as a disclaimer, before I get into what I liked and disliked about this film, I do want to say that I have not read the book. I know that for diehard Stephen King fans that have read the book, that means that my opinion is going to mean a lot less to you. However, in my opinion, films that are based on previous materials need to be able to stand on their own for what they are. It all can't fall on the audience to have read or seen previous items just to understand a new film that is being made. So for me, I am judging this film on the film that it is and not on anything else. To start off with, I think that an obvious thing that everyone has been saying is the amazing young cast in this film. All of the young actors in this movie do an amazing job. Jaden Lieberher plays Bill, who's sort of the leader of this group of kids, and he actually has a stutter in the film, and he does an amazing job with that, along with all of the other acting that his character has, because he has some rather emotional sequences in the film, and he really sold them all really well. Finn Wolfhard, who most people know from Stranger Things now, was really fun. He was sort of the comic relief of the group, and it was really nice to see that, because he actually had a lot of really funny one-liners throughout the film, and I really enjoyed his character. A couple of the other kids were less important to the group, however their performances were still solid. Sophia Lillis, who played Beverly in the film, she's the only female in this group of friends that was all involved in the story, was also really fun. She actually really sold all of her serious performance roles, but she also has sort of a fun, like, secret admirer storyline going on that was actually really entertaining to see her interact with the different boys in the group because they're all sort of so enamored by the fact that there's a girl hanging out with them. Also, the setting of Derry, Maine was a really solid place to set this film up because all of the adults there seem to just be content with whatever it is that's going on that's taking these kids away and sort of kidnapping them. They just don't seem to worry about it. So the children in the film really do feel isolated in that there's no one there to help them. All of the makeup and prosthetics throughout the film for the different things that it becomes were really good. I thought that that was one of the most impressive things about this film, was its real focus on having practical effects, and everything in this film feels practical. I'll talk about a few of the CGI aspects later, but almost all of the gore and action and monsters in this film were purely practical, which made them that much more intense when you see them on screen. The score of the film was good, and it helped with the layers that were involved in the story, because the story definitely has more than just a base horror film. It definitely, you can delve deeper into what different things mean and why different things matter in the film, and this is the first in a series. That's not a spoiler because they already announced the sequels coming out in 2019. So I'm not spoiling anything by saying that. So I think that the fact that this first film had layers to it only shows that future films will hopefully continue to delve even deeper into what those different layers of this small town and these weird happenings consist of. And as I said with the young cast doing a good job, I honestly really enjoyed the group of friends, like the young group of friends who ride around on their bikes aspect of this. It felt nostalgic in a way. And I know for a lot of people they're going to be like, it's like a Stranger Things movie. One of my friends even said that to me when I was talking to them about this film. They were like, yeah, if you haven't read the books, it might just feel like a cool Stranger Things film. But I get that, but it also still works. Even if it is sort of just a nostalgic-y vibe, I still enjoyed that aspect of the film. And a lot of that came from the fact that there was a lot of really fun humor between these friends that felt real. It didn't feel like it was just planted there to add a different thing to the film. It genuinely felt like real humor that you would have with your group of buddies. Now, the two biggest things that I enjoyed about this film I saved for the end, and number one is Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. He gives an extremely transformative performance in this film. He was phenomenal. He changes his voice, his mannerisms. Everything about him is unrecognizable, and I realize not a lot of people may know Bill Skarsgård from many things, but that doesn't really change the fact that he is a totally non-human in this film. You don't look at him and see like, oh, that's a person in makeup. You're like, that's a scary clown, or that's some other sort of monster, and I really thought that was amazing, and I have to give him props for that performance, because now I really want to see what he continues to do in Hollywood. Obviously, for future It films, he will continue to portray that character, I'm assuming, but he was just so good in this role, and I think it was really great because so many people hold Tim Curry's performance from the 1990s in such high esteem that I think it was great that the performance in this film was another really phenomenal performance as this character. However, the thing that I liked the most about this movie is the directing. Andy Muschietti has such a command over the environment and the camera in this film that at every turn, every little twist, every little cut, you are like sort of sitting there wondering what is going to be on the edge of that camera. That corner that you can't see, that doorway that you can't see, that darkness that's just barely in the background. At every single second, you're wondering what is there, and he has used that to build suspense throughout the film. In the beginning, you weren't aware of it, and then as the film moved on, you began to realize that where this camera is looking isn't necessarily going to be where the action is happening. And that seems like such a juvenile way of putting it, but that takes real skill. That's extremely difficult to build suspense from just your camera work as a director, and this film really benefited from that aspect of it because the mystery of a horror film is what truly makes it suspenseful. Now, in terms of what I didn't like about this film, number one, as I stated earlier, there is some CGI and there's some green screen in the film, and some of it looks pretty rough. It's not great, and it's also at really random and odd times that I felt like were just unnecessary, and I think a lot of them were from reshoots where they realized they needed to add an extra shot in, so they just used a green screen, because why would you go all the way back to wherever you were shooting on location to get just one shot? So I understand why they were there, however, they just looked really bad, and I think maybe in the long run, it maybe just made more sense to not have them be there. And then the other thing is character development. So while this film has a really great young cast, and they all sort of have their moments to shine, I felt like not all of them were developed enough. While the lead character of Bill and I think Beverly got a good amount, the two of them were given quite a bit of backstory. And I think you did genuinely care about those two characters. However, the rest of the group wasn't really given much at all. They got maybe their little like tidbit or their little like thing, you know, like every person in the group has a thing, but none of them were given real development for me to care about them. And honestly, even Bill and Beverly, I didn't care that much about. I knew certain aspects of their lives from the story, but nothing about it was like, I feel genuinely attached to these characters. They were just kind of there in the situation, so I was maybe a little worried, but I wasn't like heart-wrenchingly, suspensefully scared for what was going to happen to them. And now to get to the big thing that I feel like a lot of people aren't going to agree with me on, but this movie isn't very scary. It's just not. It's not a very scary film. It has a really great performance from Skarsgård. I'm not going to take anything away from his performance, but I think it really is a pacing issue. So for the first 30 minutes of this movie, I would say it's a solid horror film. You're scared. You're worried about what's going to happen. You don't know where this character is going to be, what's going to happen, how it's all going to go down, what it is going to show up as. But after that point, you get used to the fact that all of the scares in this film are basically just jump scares. And this film doesn't invest itself into building an ambiance of fear around situations. It rather decides, hey, we're in a sequence with this character, and I understand in the beginning, each character has to have their experience with it so they can all come together to fight it. But while those experiences happened and they were all really good, after that point when those experiences were done, every scene you went into, you just expected a jump scare. And it wasn't like I don't want to say it wasn't poorly done or well done. They were just in the middle because they worked for the scenes they were in, but they also were sort of just annoying after a certain point because I wanted more out of this character of Pennywise and of it. I wanted to see something new, where instead it sort of turned into, okay, they're entering a situation where there's probably gonna be some spooky stuff. And then after the spooky stuff happened, there was a jump scare with a really loud sound, and everybody in the theater jumped, and then that was it. That was the whole scare. And it sort of just lost me because while this film is well made, it's got amazing production value, it's extremely well directed, it just doesn't have any of the elements of a truly great horror film. Any great horror film builds a story, and then it builds characters, and then it has a great villain that you are afraid of, but that you also know exists, and you don't have to think like, oh, I wonder what it's gonna do next. You know its goal. And I think that you get that in this film with Pennywise. You get a villain that truly has its goal, and you know what its goal is. And you have a story that works, that you're interested in, that you want to see where it goes. And you have characters that maybe you're sort of attached to, not as much as you should be, but enough. But then the script decides that rather than using all of these aspects to combine them together to form a film and form situations that are very full of suspense where you don't know what's going to happen next, you're basically just sitting there by the end of the film waiting for the next jump scare. And that's the thing that really got to me, because I wanted more out of this film. I wanted this film to be scary. I wanted it to have a genuine horror element. I remember talking to people when they saw the first Conjuring. That movie scared, like terrified people. And I think that this movie ended up being a solid film about a group of kids that are hunting down a monster, but it just wasn't a horror film. It was just sort of a dramatic film that had some jump scares. I'm gonna give it a B-. Now, I don't want to take anything away from the performances that this cast gave. All of the kids and Skarsgård both gave phenomenal performances. This movie is beautifully directed by Andy Muschietti, and I am genuinely excited to see where this story goes in future films. And I think that this first film succeeded at being an all-right film, but I don't think it succeeded at being a horror film. It wasn't cheesy, and it wasn't too over the top. Everything in it fit very well with the story. I just think they needed to invest more in building the suspense of horror and building the environment and making us truly scared for these kids that we should genuinely care about. And I think that if they can do that in whatever comes next, we could truly get some of the best horror films of this era. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of it, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, be sure to check out the Netflix recommendation video that I did last week, and hope to see you guys later.